Hello everyone, welcome to yet another day in this the Clown Decade, the decade where things are only going to get worse before they get better. And today we are going through why it appears everyone in the media and political class were telling us that Shabana Mahmood is actually going to play quite hardball when it comes to being Home Secretary. I couldn't see why people thought that she would be, but as it turns out, she is actually making, from the looks of it, improving reforms. Now, they're not going to solve the issue by any stretch of the imagination, but I would argue that her reforms are definitely a better situation than we are in now, where it appears that illegals can come over carte blanche, and getting rid of them involves paying them £3,000 a pop. So the net flows of illegal migration is very much still in the they're all coming over side of reality. So let's get into it. Shabana Mahmood's asylum seeker policy reforms are the key points, and the Times are usually quite good at writing all this stuff up. So the refugee status will become temporary and reviewed every 13 months and will only be renewed if someone is still considered in need of protection. While protection is no longer needed, the person will become liable for removal from the UK. Mahmood said the refugees would be returned home as soon as their country was deemed safe by the Home Office. Now, this is a good idea, and why refugee status wasn't made temporary much earlier, I don't know. I understand why it wasn't done in the first place, because again, a lot of our refugee policy effectively comes from the war, but even in the war, we didn't have as much freedom for refugees. Even all the Czechoslovakian kids who were moved over to escape Nazi occupation, they could only come over if they managed to find sponsors, which obviously some British people were going around asking if they could get sponsorship from families all over the country. Nowadays, these asylum seekers are just thrown into barracks. They were thrown into hotels. Too many people complained about that. They then threw them in HMOs. Too many people complained about that. So now they're in barracks, and now people are complaining about that. So now the government has finally got it and realised, okay, we will make sure that these people are actually here legitimately. Couldn't have done that earlier, could you? Anyway, this is a good aspect. Resuming deportations to safe countries, the policy document sets out plans to deport individuals to countries where officials do not routinely return people. The Home Office said it was exploring the option of forcibly removing failed asylum seekers to Syria following the re-establishment of diplomatic relations with the new government in Damascus after the overthrow of the Assad regime. Yep, again, better than what we have now, I will say, but comparing it to reforms policy of just we will return these people even to Afghanistan, it's still pretty lacklustre, but again, better than what we have now. So, next up, family returns. The government said it did not currently prioritise the return of families even when their home country was safe, and as a result, ministers said that many families of failed asylum seekers continue to live in the country for many years, receiving free accommodation and financial support. They argued that this made it attractive for families to bring children on small boat crossings, which do they? Under the plans, families whose asylum claim has been rejected will be deported if they refuse financial incentives to return home. Ministers said the enforced removal will be pursued where they refuse to engage with the return process, and Mahmood told MPs, "We will now begin the removal of families." Cool, fine, better than what we have now. Why are we giving them money to be deported? I see a lot of people on Twitter basically getting almost running out of patience and saying, oh, just pay them to leave. No. We are not giving them money to leave. It makes sense for people who have lived here legitimately for some years to take money to move back home, let's say. But with illegals, no, they have to be forced. They are criminals. We are not giving criminals money. That is absolutely ridiculous. Financial incentives to return home. Illegal migrants will be offered thousands of pounds to return home under plans to trial increase financial incentive payouts to dramatically increase removals. Presently, they get £3,000 if they return home voluntarily, and the Home Office will test higher payments to see if more migrants return home voluntarily. Officials have not disclosed how much the increased payments will be. No, don't do that. I don't understand why we have to pay people to get them on a plane. Why can't we force them? Are you kidding me? I don't understand where the logic for this is. Oh, let's incentivise people to leave. You also incentivise them to travel back over illegally and, get more money to return home. It's like the Atrean man who was a bit of a paedophile and managed to accidentally run away from prison for 2 days. He got given £500 when he left, and people were pointing out that's like a year and a half's wages in Eritrea. Why would we give people these money, especially paedophiles, by the way? That makes no sense. And doing it for anyone who's crossed the border illegally, it makes absolutely no sense morally or even logically to me. Why are you effectively rewarding people for crossing the channel and then pay them to leave? Now, one of the big headline grabbers up next, 20-year wait for permanent residency. Refugees who arrive illegally will have to wait 20 years before they can apply for permanent settlement in the UK, which will become the longest route to settlement anywhere in Europe and quadruple the current time frame of 5 years. I'm going to throw it out again. I don't understand why they get permanent residency. Why is that a thing for any migrant, frankly? That's why I like the idea from Reform. If you can stick to a work visa for 7 years, clearly you are very much needed here. Clearly you actually quite like the place, and at that point you should try and become a citizen if you want to stay here. Otherwise, rug pull from the visa, away you go. Again, this possibly made sense back in the war, where obviously it was mostly Europeans who were refugees, because reality of geography. And to be fair, quite a few of them did integrate, but we're at a point where that's not happening anymore. We're in a completely different world. So, okay, 20-year wait for permanent residency, that's an improvement, don't get me wrong. But I just remove the possibility of permanent residency entirely. You stay here for 7, 10 years, whatever, then maybe you can become a citizen. That makes a bit more sense. However, refugees will be able to switch to a new work and study route if they obtain employment or study at an appropriate level and pay a fee. Once on this route, they will become eligible to earn settlement after 10 years. Oh, this kind of makes a lot of what we've already gone through quite pointless. What this is effectively saying is that there is now a work and study route for refugees. If you come over here and manage to obtain employment or get into a university, then you are effectively allowed to stay here, well, forever. Because although they can earn settlement after 10 years, whatever, but it doesn't really go into detail here. I don't understand how this doesn't mean that you've moved from being on a refugee visa to a work or study visa. If it turns out you've been here for 30 months and wherever you've come from is actually safe, are you kicked off your course? I don't think so. I reckon you stay here. And the study visa is one of the biggest lightning rods for fraudsters to get into the UK and then just get lost in the system. Same thing can happen here. Same with work. We know that there are an awful lot of places where you can probably get a work visa, Turkish barbers, and then not actually have to work there, and then you're lost in the system because you've been taken off the refugee side of things. So if I were to get rid of anything so far, it would definitely be this work and study route. At least while we have a country that has amassed a massive level of work and study fraud. Sort that out before you put this in place, good lord. Access to benefits. Refugees will no longer be given unconditional access to benefits. Why were they ever? There are currently 120,000 refugees in receipt of universal credit. What? The government said that it expects those who arrive in the UK to seek work and would change the benefit system to prioritise access for those who are making an economic contribution to the United Kingdom. Okay, not the worst reasoning in the world. Home Office sources said the change were likely to require refugees to meet the same criteria as British citizens, such as seeking work, which is not presently the case. This is ridiculous, by the way. I know people who have tried to get on universal credit, and there's so many loopholes you have to jump through, it's ridiculous. This is true even for people who are working, by the way, but you have to prove that you're actively looking for a job to get universal credit, even if you already have one, that you are working full-time. It's ridiculous. But cutting benefits and getting refugees to work, to be honest with you, even working as Deliveroo drivers, probably not the worst thing in the world. The problem we have with Deliveroo drivers is that it's a bit of a black market. People will make accounts and then effectively lease them out to illegal migrants so the illegal migrants can make money. But this is for genuine refugees. That's a little bit different. And again, if we get back to a point where we're actually seeing a hell of a lot less people crossing the channel and we have a hell of a lot less refugees coming over, well, sorry, I shouldn't say refugees, illegal migrants coming over, and the people who are actually in the country are genuine refugees, then yeah, not bad. And I think the reducing access to benefits is a good way to do that, and I think getting them to work also isn't necessarily a bad idea. It is a point that's usually brought up by left-wingers, oh, these people want to work but they can't, and part of me's always thought, yeah, that kind of makes sense actually, why are they banned from working? There is also the end to automatic financial accommodation support. Automatic financial support and free accommodation for asylum seekers deemed to be destitute will be revoked. The weekly allowance and housing will be withdrawn from those who can work. There are more than 8,000 asylum seekers with the right to work living in taxpayer-funded accommodation who could lose that housing according to the Home Office. One thing that isn't quite mentioned here is that while the automatic right to these things may be revoked, the conditional right to these things will still be given at a 90-odd% rate, as is still the case. You just add more people to that. And also, I'm pretty sure our human rights laws stop us from making people homeless, so if they just claim this will make me homeless, though, that's when they go into the conditional support. Now we get into the big meme. Jewellery and other assets confiscated to pay for costs. Illegal migrants who have assets such as cars, e-bikes or illegal migrants who have cars will be required to make contribution towards their accommodation and will apply to asylum seekers who have some other income but not enough to support themselves independently. Why are illegal migrants, why are they required to make a contribution towards their accommodation? Why can't you just deport them? That's a weird sentence. The policy document says that the government will also set up efforts to recover support costs if a migrant fails to declare their assets on arrival. This is the whole cash for asylum that's the meme that's going around. According to actual statistics, the measure is untested in the UK, but in Denmark, confiscations have only been made 17 times in the past 6 years. Denmark has also only deported about 300 people. The other thing is that a lot of people were saying, oh, they're trying to copy Denmark here. The thing is that Denmark went way further with their whole immigration policy, and the UK isn't even attempting to do any of the sort of things that Denmark has been planning. And to be honest, there's some reason for that, because Denmark are obviously trying to do the whole anti-ghettoisation thing, which makes complete sense. The problem in the United Kingdom is that you've had ghettoisation going on for, well, 80 years, and it's much easier to break up a ghetto that is 5 years old than one that is 80 years old. I'm not saying it necessarily shouldn't happen. What I am saying is that, you know, Hare Hill's happened. And, well, you try and break up these ghettos, not necessarily going to be an easy time. There's also visa penalties for countries that refuse to take back migrants. Countries that refuse to take back illegal migrants and foreign criminals will face visa penalties. The first countries to face the Trump-style sanction will be Angola, Namibia, oh really, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. They will face a sliding scale of penalties if their government do not rapidly improve cooperation on removal. This will begin with softer penalties imposed on diplomats and VIPs who will lose priority access to UK visa system even for tourist visas, and they will be forced to queue outside embassies. More serious penalties will follow if cooperation does not improve, ending with a complete ban on all citizens gaining visas to come to the United Kingdom. This is very good, actually. This is one of the things that Rupert Lowe has been pushing for some time, just punish countries in terms of the visas they can get if they're not taking back illegals. The list should be much wider, by the way, but it is a good start. There will now be a single route of appeal for rejected asylum seekers. Migrants will be given one opportunity to appeal, and if unsuccessful, they will be required to leave the United Kingdom. Yes, another mad thing about the current system, you can appeal as many times as you want, and that's why you get clogged up in the system. The one-stop shop appeal system will stop failed asylum seekers launching appeal after appeal to stall their removal. The government will also change the law to ensure any further family rights that are accrued after migrants are ordered to leave the UK will also be lost. So they can't suddenly find long-lost cousins who live in London or something and say, oh, I need to be here because family and Article 3, blah blah blah. I'd say of all reforms, this is probably the single most effective one that we've had so far. But again, it can be completely subverted if they end up on an easy work and study visa instead, which to me is what the, well, work and study route is. So yeah, not ideal. There will also be a new appeals body. The document sets out plans to replace the current appeals process, which is overseen by judges sitting on immigration and asylum tribunal courts, with a new independent appeal body. This will be staffed by professionally trained adjudicators appointed by the Home Office and will be responsible for identifying individuals who have little prospect of successfully appealing against their deportation, to enable their case to be fast-tracked and hasten their deportation. Again, another good move, I would argue. But what stops these people getting on work and study visas before getting to this point? That is something that is going to be at the back of my mind until I see this fully implemented. I don't know how they're going to get around that. Again, this is why this plan pales in comparison to what Reform are putting forward. Reform get the point that criminals, criminal gangs, illegal migrants will try and find and exploit absolutely every loophole that they can. And the problem we have with these reforms is that it still has pretty glaring loopholes. Hopefully they won't be as big as I am worried about, but, well, this is Labour we're talking about, and I don't exactly hold out high hopes. So there's some ECHR reforms. Article 8 is being restricted because obviously it's a massive loophole in the migration system. It's the whole thing with the, oh, my child can't eat chicken nuggets in Romania or whatever. So judges need to think about the British people first. They also need to make sure that they only consider immediate family as family members rather than distant cousins. And of course, they should not allow migrants to make the Article 8 claims from overseas, because then you get scope creep, such as allowing Palestinian families to come over on a Ukraine family scheme. Again, good, and is a rather large part of the loophole that we are seeing with the migration crisis. But again, they're still opening one with the work and study scheme. However, while there are promises of Article 3 which protects against inhuman and degrading treatment, they're not going to be reformed, even though again this is a bit of a loophole since it's used by foreign criminals to block their removal based on arguments such as inferior prison conditions or lack of adequate mental health provisions in their home. And the idea here is that Britain will try and reform it at the European level rather than in British courts. Again, another reason to go with the reform plan of just leave the damn thing. Oh god, new safe and legal routes for asylum seekers. Ministers want more refugees to arrive legally to get jobs and integrate into communities. It will offer a shorter 10-year pathway for those who arrive in the UK legally under a new work and study route, and this route will be capped. I thought they weren't capped. No, I just checked, apparently it will be capped. I thought there was a route here that was uncapped, but, well, if it's capped, that's not so bad. Those who are granted asylum can also switch and enter the pathway, provided they pay a visa fee. Once on this route, refugees will become eligible to earn settlement sooner than they would otherwise after 10 years. Those who switch to work and study visa route could become eligible to sponsor family members to come to the UK, providing qualifying requirements are met. Oh, that's not helpful. We're at a time where even legal migration is seen as an absolutely ridiculous thing now because there's been so much of it. And this once again is just expanding it. Again, news came out yesterday that the ONS are so useless that they had to upscale how many British nationals that is, actually left the country. They shoved it up by about 100,000. I mean, talk about replacement migration. That's literally what's happening. Who's leaving the country? Largely Brits at this point. It did actually used to be the case that it was foreigners who left the country after running out with work visas or whatever. Now, not so much. It's people fleeing to Canada, Australia, New Zealand, the USA. Plenty of people were saying on Twitter, oh, I've had loads of anecdotes of this actually, this makes sense. Me included. I've literally sponsored people to leave the country. And, well, who are we replacing them with? People who are supposed to be uplifting the Ponzi scheme of state pensions. No, that's not happening anymore. They are now largely dependent on the state too. And so we've ended up in this silly situation where now the only way we can actually pay for all this is by borrowing. The bond markets are having enough of that, and now literally nobody seems to know how to actually get the country growing again, aside obviously from reform. Homes for Ukraine style scheme for all refugees. The document sets out plans to expand the community sponsorship model that will allow households to offer homes for Ukraine-style arrangements to refugees from all nations. In the long term, Mahmoud wants to make such a model the norm and see the pledge to make sure the pace and scale of change did not exceed what the local area was willing to accept. The government would like to see a greater local and voluntary sector involvement in the housing of refugees. Out of interest, what stops NGOs from, say, buying up an apartment complex and stuffing them with refugees out of interest? To be honest with you, this is how it used to work. to get refugees over, they used to have to get sponsorships plus a fee to actually, allow them in. This is what happened with the kinder transport from Czechoslovakia, and that was Jewish kids fleeing from Nazis. It was literally harder for a Jewish kid to get away from the Nazis to come to Britain than it is for literally any refugee to get in now. And so a move back to that might be quite helpful. I don't think this is the worst idea in the world, but again, how do you stop nefarious NGOs from abusing that scheme? I don't know, and I don't think that's really been thought about. And finally, the last thing here, age assessments. AI and facial recognition technology will strengthen the age assessment process to prevent abuse where adults claim to be kids. Labour has ditched the previous government's plans to use X-rays and MRI scans of bones to assess the age of migrants. What? So why? Why don't you... What? I don't understand what's the issue with using X-rays and MRIs, but we're fine with using AI and facial recognition. That's a little bit odd to me. I get the feeling that Labour don't want to use X-rays and MRIs. To be honest, that's probably actually a lot more expensive than just facial recognition technology. If it's a cost thing, then fair enough. But I can't help but think that that sounds a bit Auschwitz to us. That's what I think Labour's actual problem with it is. Either way, yes, that is a very, very good reform as well. And this is the thing, overall, it's probably more good than it is bad, but the bad parts can really be exploited to actually make the whole situation worse. Do I think it will be worse? Probably not. Do I think that this is all going to stop the boat? No, I don't think so. Because ultimately, what is the big deterrent here? I don't really see one. We already know that work and especially study visas are used fraudulently. I don't see why opening that route up to potentially illegal migrants would help anything. When it comes to settlement status, again, it doesn't really matter. Illegal migrants are here illegally. They don't really care for the settlement status. You can't appeal as much as you used to. Okay, if I'm deported, I'll just come back. That's what seems to happen quite a lot. I'm just failing to see the big, this is what is going to make sure that people don't want to come here. I don't really see that. Having said that, it certainly will make deportations easier, but I still think you're going to have a massive backlog and problems with actually getting these people deported. I don't think they've got quite to the core issue of that, which is the judiciary, the court. There's a lot of left-wing NGOs that are pushing their agenda within these institutions, and there's nothing at all done on that. In fact, they've given them more options to grant visas and things like that to refugees and illegal migrants. And well, the reaction from the left is that more than 24 MPs voiced public criticism of the reforms, including senior moderate figures such as Sarah Owen, chair of the Women and Equalities Committee, who branded the proposals repugnant. They weren't repugnant at all, they were fine. In fact, they were kind of lacking. The Home Office said the plans aimed to tackle hesitancy about returning families, which has created a particularly perverse incentive for parents to send their children on small boats to the UK in order to exploit laws by putting down routes to thwart removals. Well, that's still going to happen because Article 8 still would allow children to be used as the reason for them to stay. If anything, all it's going to do is push people to bring their legitimate children with them rather than lie about it. So it's specifically at least 25 Labour MPs who expressed concern at various aspects of the reform. Owen said that there was no evidence that stripping refugees' rights would deter migrants crossing the Channel. I kind of agree with her. A lot of people crossing the Channel, they just try and find loopholes, and as soon as they find another loophole, they'll all exploit that too. Which again is why the reform idea works better. There's no loophole to even look for. You're here illegally, you're going, son. Referring to a move by the previous Tory government to remove children's murals at immigration detention centres, thank you Robert Jenrick for that, she said, taking jewellery from refugees is akin to painting over murals from refugee children. These repugnant deterrents did not work for the Tories and they won't work for us. I'm kind of with them on that. Plus, again, look at the Denmark case, it rarely happens anyway. Olivia Blake, Labour MP for Sheffield Hallam, described the reforms as deeply offensive, accusing them of feeding division. Naz Shah, Labour MP for Bradford West, expressed concern that her own foster son, an Afghan refugee, may not have qualified for asylum under the new policies. And Richard Bergen, the Labour MP for Leeds East, said that his party's new asylum policy scrapes the bottom of the barrel and accuses Mahmood of a desperate attempt to triangulate with reform. I mean, this is what it is. It's definitely triangulation, but it's one that doesn't even make sense. If you're going to triangulate this, you have to go actually further than reform, not way behind reform. Because again, just looking into the details of it, okay, I can see where the headlines would come from, but the headlines come from kind of bit parts, like we're going to take refugees gold to pay for the asylum accommodation and their food. But I'm sorry, taking gold chains, assuming they're even remotely close to as dressed up as 50 Cent or whatever, I don't know rappers very well, it's going to come nowhere near actually paying for their accommodation. The point more is almost a humiliation ritual of, oh, you came over here via the non-safe and legal route, therefore we're going to take your gold. Again, you may as well just deport them. I'm not even against it in principle, by the way. They are criminals, and I do not have a problem with confiscating some of their property in being a criminal. That's fine. The thing is that, okay, they just won't come over with jewellery then. Well done. Anyway, finally, Cat Eccles, the Labour MP for Stourbridge, accused ministers of trying to appease the electorate with dog whistles. God forbid a political party try and appease the electorate. And also, what's the dog whistle? This is actual policy. She told Times Radio, it does have echoes of reform and populist opinion. Yeah. It just feels that they are trying to be seen as doing something just to appease the electorate. Yeah, they're a political party. And yes, we're here to please voters. Okay, so there you go. But I don't think this is the right thing to do right now. We should be making the case as to why we need to be properly compassionate and not just pandering to these dog whistles. Sorry, we've had that for years. It's a complete and utter mess. Girls are getting assaulted. Some are even being raped, by the way. People are being murdered. It's an utter catastrophe. Sorry, the time for compassion is over. We need to get this back to a normal working system, which it is nowhere near at the moment, and frankly these reforms are nowhere near actually going to be enough. The number of Tory MPs and Reform MPs who are welcoming these new ideas, I think it just tells you how vastly wrong we've got it. Sorry, but the left is over. You don't have any ideas. All you can really say over and over is open borders good because they make me feel good. It's done. It's over. Listen to any New Statesman podcast. They got Ollie Dugmore on, and people on the left are even fed up of him being a leftist NPC. That is how over it is for the left. Even their core audience is now basically saying, you know what, Reform actually have some good points. Stuff isn't working. It needs to be fixed. And other leftist MPs from other leftist parties were equally as shocked at these reforms. Here's the Green Party's former leader, Carla Denyer, or co-leader, because there used to be two.
Attempting to out-reform reform is actually just boosting this baseless far-right narrative and will only deepen divisions when we urgently need leadership and hope instead.
This is just the leftist position now. Are you doing anything remotely close to reform? Bad, bad, bad. While reform just sits smugly while they remain at 30 to 35% in the polls. To be fair, their highest is 34, but soon it'll be 35. And give it a couple of years with these reforms being implemented and not an awful lot actually changing, yeah, they're going to go even higher. Anyway, ex-Labour MP and in and out of your party MP, I guess, Zara Sultana also had things to say about this particular policy.
Sivanandan warned, and I quote, what Enoch Powell says today, the Conservatives say tomorrow, and Labour legislates the day after.
Sorry, if you think Labour in the 70s went anywhere close to what Enoch Powell wanted, I guess I've got news for you. In fact, the Tories never even really started saying what Enoch Powell was saying until obviously the 80s with Margaret Thatcher, and even then they never went as hard on migration as Enoch Powell may have wanted. But did you know we had net emigration during Thatcher's time? And that was not like emigration like it is now. It was not mostly Brits leaving. In fact, Brits were coming back because Britain was no longer the sick man of Europe. By the way, I expect the same thing to happen under reform over the 2030s. I literally just think we're having a repeat of the 70s and 80s just 50 years later, by the way. You know, it's like poetry, it rhymes.
seizing valuables belonging to asylum seekers, making refugees wait 20 years before they can apply to settle permanently, and deporting entire families, including children, who have built new lives here because their country of origin is deemed safe. These measures are straight out of the fascist playbook.
Okay. Wanting secure borders is fascist, yes, sure, whatever. Again, mental communist. There's no reasoning with someone like this, and again, this was entirely expected. You've got two massive cohorts of people in politics these days, and luckily, with the right wing, a lot of that is obviously swirling around the Reform Party. When it comes to the left, they have a wealth of choice between about 6 parties, and, well, one of those parties died a death with your party, but the rest are all trying to drag the vote, but effectively between, are you a student, are you a pensioner, are you a middle-class lovey, etc., etc. Whereas Reform just say, it doesn't matter if you're a pensioner, middle class, or working class, come join the fight and, become an MP, blah, blah, blah. I mean, I see it every time I go leafleting. You know, I'm usually the upper middle class one, and usually it's people between working class, and I've even been with more upper class people, we shall say, but I hate the whole idea of class analysis anyway, so you get the idea with Zara Sultana. You don't need to hear any more, we'll just move on. I move on to the fact that this actually does seem quite a step away from what Shabana Mahmood has been saying over the past decade. I mean, I'll just play this clip.
We're still here at Skibenia, where another boat of refugees has arrived over from Turkey, and the layout is that there's a clothes station where they can get some dry clothes, and then there's a medic station, and then there's some food. All of this is being provided primarily by young Greek volunteers, and honestly, I take my hat off to them. Some of these people don't have very much.
Yeah, she was in the Mediterranean, or on the coast of the Mediterranean, I should say, effectively saying it's actually a good thing that people are coming illegally over on boats and then being looked after by NGOs. And this is a complete 180. Now, me included in this to some degree, were saying that, oh, this shows Shabana Mahmood doesn't really have her heart into dealing with this issue. And this isn't the only time. That's a clip from 2025, but here's another clip. And then when she was a backbench MP, she was happy to go on television and say general amnesty for refugees that are here.
Myself personally, as a Labour backbench Member of Parliament, I do support a general amnesty for all people who are already in the country, so they can regularise their status and start playing a full part in British society.
And now obviously she's dead set against that. People say that this is her being fake. I think it's a lot more simple than that, in that she is just following incentives. What gets you elected as a Labour MP back in 2015, say, being so pro-illegal migrant and refugee that it's just ridiculous, and in hindsight she probably feels like a moron. What gets you elected these days? Dealing with the illegal migrant problem. If nothing else, this shows how much of a shift to the right the Overton window has taken. We should be quite happy about that, to be honest. And my position is that I think Shabana Mahmood genuinely wants to actually deal with this problem, because frankly it keeps her in a job. Ultimately, MPs are lazy. They will just do whatever they have to do to win votes. Back in 2015, the way you do that was by being incredibly left-wing, at least from their perspective. I know a lot of people are going to say, well, obviously people didn't want illegal immigrants back then. Yes, I agree, but it wasn't quite the issue it is now. And again, these are people who are mostly in a Westminster bubble, and now the Westminster bubble frankly can't ignore the fact that they have Reform growing what used to be exponentially. Obviously they're stuck at around 30% these days, but still completely outperforming every other party. Why? Because they massively went all in on fixing the immigration issue, and now they're having to catch up with the rest of the issues of cost of living and all that. And in fact, Nigel Farage made a statement on Twitter. Whilst the strong language from Shabana Mahmood is encouraging, even an audition to join Reform, I have serious doubts. Will it survive her own backbenchers in a vote? This is the thing, probably not. They're already rebelling. Will the new legal routes lead to even higher numbers? That's a very good question, and one that I have made the point on. And with the ECHR in place, can any of it even work? Yeah, how do you actually reduce the power of Article 8 and Article 3 that we're talking about? They already backed off on that, as we read. They already have to back off on one part of this plan because of the ECHR. Why wouldn't that happen for the rest of it? Anyway, she was asked about this tweet on an ITV News interview.
Farage has tonight said that he thinks you're auditioning to join Reform.
Well, firstly, Nigel Farage can keep his opinions to himself. He can frankly sod off. I'm not interested in anything that he has to say.
I mean, this is exactly the type of reaction that I think Nigel Farage, his team, and the rest of the Reform, frankly, wanted off Shabana Mahmood. Hello, you're clearly trying to ape our voters. Our voters want something a lot harder than this, though. Oh, go away. I have to say as well, I'm getting quite fed up of the puerile language that an awful lot of politicians tend to use these days. Reform, by the way, definitely are a part of this problem. But there seems to be much looser swearing and crass language that come from politicians, and I think it's basically me complaining to a wall at this point. But I do want to go back to days where, well, there wasn't any swearing from our political leaders, and the language they use, frankly, should be fit for a palace. After all, they work in the Palace of Westminster. Anyway, the point was also made that this isn't going to woo reformers over because they're already voting for reform who want to go further than this, and it's just going to alienate a lot of the left, which is still somewhat Labour's core vote.
And let me just say to people of all political persuasions who are watching, I'm not making a political calculation here. I'm not making an election calculation here. It is my responsibility as the Home Secretary of this country, who can see a broken system, to work out how to fix that broken system and to work out what is the right thing to do, and then to go out there and make the argument for why these changes are the right thing to do for the right reasons, because they will fix the problems that people genuinely see and genuinely are occurring, and in doing so, to retain support for having an asylum system at all.
She's a bit exacerbated by this answer because I don't think she really believes that. I think she knows her hands are kind of tied in terms of can't go as far as Reform want to go, and Reform will probably actually do a better job of fixing the problem. But if I end up going too far, I end up losing all the left vote that go to Labour and kill the party. I mean, literally, the problem Labour have is that they understand to stay in power they have to move right, but to do that you're basically aping Reform, and why would anyone believe you after the disaster of the first year that you've had? On top of that, I think absolutely everyone in the Cabinet knows that Starmer's time as PM is coming to an end, and they know that their jobs are at risk. And to be honest with you, I think whoever's replacing Starmer will be on the left of the party, make the problems a hell of a lot worse, and immigration will be less of a priority to them. It's going to suck. Anyway, outside Parliament, Zach Polanski was doing his classic, aren't Labour going to these inhumane levels, and isn't it ridiculous once again?
Every single Labour MP needs to look to their conscience.
Why?
The interview we just heard, you said it yourself. The question was, you never told anyone when they voted they were voting for this. This is extreme, this is inhumane, and it is a government of cowards. Rather than take on the powerful, because the issue here is not immigration, it's inequality.
That's enough of that. We know what Zach Polanski's going to say. To any leftists that made it this far into the video saying, I just don't like what Polanski has to say, and I don't want people to hear it. I just know what he's going to say more than I don't care to hear it. I don't care to hear it because I've gone through Polanski enough to know that a lot of political grifters, literally all they can do is have a script that they read off of, and no matter what conversation they're in, they will pivot to one of these scripts and just recite it. And I know what he's going to say about equality, or pensioners, or immigrants, or people on benefits, blah, blah, blah. I'm fed up of it. It's completely wrong, but at least he's 17% in the polls. That, if nothing else, depresses me beyond belief. And we, of course, also have the everyone I don't like is a fascist aesthetic from Cold War Steve, a leftist account, believe it or not. Yeah, again, fascists don't think that this goes anywhere near far enough. Even your normie reform voter who's nowhere near a fascist doesn't think this goes far enough. And, looking at the opening of the legal routes that at least appear to be capped from what I could tell, and if they're not, that's even worse, then yes, this is just once again outrageous. But what do you expect from the left? They're completely, out of ideas. All of their ideas have been exhausted over the past 20 years, and once again they have to fall back on, everyone I don't like's a fascist. It's pathetic. Anyway, the best part of all these leftists saying, these people are fleeing war zones and all that, I'm just gonna play a clip from ITV News interviewing a whole load of people who are prepared to cross the channel to get into the UK. Let's see what their reasoning is for crossing.
We know England is a better place to live. We want to live like just normal person, have a normal life, just make England proud. It's easier to understand English, to learn English, and we have relatives and friends in England.
None of that was to do with escaping a war zone. It was, oh, I have family and friends in England, they quite like it, and I want to go over. Again, it begs the question, why are his family and friends here? Did they come over as refugees? Did they come over here legally? And on top of that, why is he moving over illegally if he has family there? He should be able to get a visa with that, but he's not bothering. The problem you have with this vox pop style of asking people why they're crossing the channel, a lot of them will just lie, but I just find it impressive that, assuming he is lying here, why wouldn't you lie about escaping a war zone? Well, okay, maybe he is telling the truth then, but his truth is absolutely no reason to come over illegally and get refugee status. That's ridiculous. Why are you coming over? Because I want to live like normal person. Oh, that doesn't get you refugee status, though. Very, very odd.
Today, the government in the UK are announcing changes to the rules to make it harder for people like you to get to the UK.
I know.
Does that change your mind?
Yes, I know, but I don't care because I'm just going for work here.
Again, this is the problem you have when you actually interview these people. They're quite open that they come from places that are not war-torn usually. And on top of that, they're quite open about the fact that they're going for economic opportunity. Which, yeah, with high skill opportunity, fine. Fill the gaps there. Not a massive problem. Problem comes in is that, what are these people's skills? They can't be very high, because if they were high, they would have come over on a work visa. And then on top of that, as we've seen, 120,000 of them are on universal credit. While they're waiting to be processed, they get put in hotels. Now, okay, a lot of that is being cut back by these reforms. That is a good thing. But ultimately, if they do manage to get on a visa scheme, what is stopping them from getting these benefits? I don't think an awful lot, because ultimately, if you're coming over on a work or study visa, to some extent you are still reliant on the state. Because ultimately, if you get a study visa, who's going to pay the uni fees? Who's going to pay student loans? Because I don't see why it would be their home country. So there we go. Right. With that, I think I can leave that video there. If you enjoy what I do, please do subscribe, leave a like, leave a comment. On top of that, you can also leave super chats, super thanks, and become a channel member. In terms of shilling, tonight it's more Deus Ex Human Revolution. Friday it's Wolves of Westminster. Saturday I really need to get guests for Laughing at the Guardian, as that is going on Saturday night. And of course, videos out as and when I can make them. I think I'm going to try and get more out this week, as I skipped Monday and Tuesday because, well, I do work, and sometimes there's a rush to get things done at work, so there you go. Plus my evenings absolutely were not free. That's another thing. So yes, with that, videos out as and when I can make them. Right, thank you all very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.